I'm gonna walk you through the Houmidi files really quick to get you up and running fast. I hope you read the GitHub wiki. If not, you can do this afterwards, or I'll try to go through the most important stuff right now. What you will need is a loop Midi plugin that loops back if you want to test it live. So the Midi data goes out from Houdini into this and then loops into your synth, which is vital in my case. So let's take a quick look at the minimal setup. You can see the trigger attribute here. If it's 1, the node is on. If it's 0, it's off. And this just makes it that it triggers every 30 frames. And if we play back, I have the live output selected. I've selected my loop MIDI port, and the trigger value has the same name. And we can hear it working. Beautiful stuff. Now we can also play with the sound note length, make it short. The standard value, if you don't supply a value, the standard would be 12. We can make it longer and shorter. Then we can set the note itself, meaning how high or low it is. Let's just start out with the C5. Should probably put this out so you can actually see the trigger attribute on here. Or you can have it change every few frames. Or go through the C major scale. Now let's go over to the next section, which is the trigger and hold mode. If you look at the output node, and you can see there's a check mark here set to hold mode. If you check that, the note length turns off, and now the length is controlled by the trigger attribute only. So if the trigger attribute is 1, the note plays as long as it's 1, and if it's 0, it turns off. As you can see here, we've set it so that it's on for 25 frames and off for 5. And let's have a listen. Yeah, that way you have more control over the setup if you don't know how long a note is gonna last, for example. Next up, let's look at the additional parameters. Those are the standard MIDI parameters like pitch, mod, aftertouch. And let's see. We are now in global mode, so that means there's one detail attribute that controls all of these, which we have right here. Pitch just goes through a sine wave. Let's have a listen. Beautiful. But you can enable all sorts of things with that. For example, the mod, if we turn that on here, I've bound the mod wheel to this filter. And the other mode is the point mode. It basically behaves the same, but the attributes are on points instead. And you kind of have to figure out which synth does what, because not all synth support all attributes or nodes or points, and not all have all detail attributes, so you'll have to play around. And what you can also do is have custom channel attributes. These only work in point mode, and you can enable them here. And in this example, I've set up a custom channel at channel 22, and it's gonna put out this value. Let's take a look what that would sound like, or look like in the synth. Once again, channel 22 and just the sine wave. We've enabled the custom channels and we are outputting the right port. And if we take a look at Cyclop here, it has a lot of custom channels, and I've set it to 22, and you can see the sine wave up here. It's moving. And if we set it to 28, nothing happens. But if we go back and change this, it should move again. There you go. Let's now look at one of my favorite features, MPE. You will need to be in point mode and enable MPE. Right now we have 4 points. They trigger on the 3rd frame and go throughout because we are in the hold mode. And let's hear what it sounds like first. So what we're doing here is basically blending between these chords, but smoothly. And it is a little complicated because the way MPE works, you can't just say, I have this note and want to go here. You have to pitch them up or down at the right interval. And that's basically what all of this code does. As you can see, we are pitching down from 60, pitch down to 55, which is basically this value. And you can just look at this code and maybe see how it works. I'm not going to go through all of it. But yeah, if you want to change notes, you will have to pitch it up and down. And yeah, just have a look at this example file. Let's now look at the file export node. The parameters are exactly the same. It works the same way as the live output node, but it creates a file on disk. Let's have a listen what this sounds like. Great stuff. Maybe we can change it up a bit. Let's use this instead. The C major scale. And I'm just going to put this out to disk. And now we can look at it in FL Studio. I've put it in here and let's press play. Basically, it should be exactly the same thing as this. Yeah. Let's take a look at MIDI input. First off, we have the file importer, which imports regular MIDI files. You can see here it has the regular attributes like the note length, velocity, trigger. It also has a start frame attribute when the note starts playing and an end frame when the note stops playing. Then we have 3 different trigger modes. First off, static, which doesn't have a trigger mode. There's no trigger here. Then we have the trigger animation mode, which has the trigger, and it's gonna not. Let's see if we can find the trigger. Oh, there it is. It's gonna trigger the notes when they're played. And then we have the point life cycle, which only has the active notes playing. The important thing is the point life cycle and the trigger animation mode both have make the mode time dependent. The static one does not. So if you have a big chain and need to work on these points quite a lot, you should use the static mode. And then over here there's the note activator, which basically does the same thing. It activates the notes. My god. There we go. And then you have the same effect as before, but you can do a lot of processing in between and activate them later on, which is way more performant. You can see the Vex node is also just in here. It's the same thing. And yeah, the attributes themselves are the exact same as as I've described before, so we should just be able to play this. Something isn't working. What is not working? I put it into static mode. Oh, my bad. No, now it should work. Can adjust the speed here. It's a bit fast. I don't know what the BPM is. I guess. Then there's also an option to import controllers, which are just detail attributes. So as you can see here, it's just a big array with each entry being one frame. We also have the option to exclude empty arrays, so we can only look at the arrays where something is in, where they have data. And we also can import the CC data. Yeah. And this, I broke this, and this doesn't work right now, but this should create controller points for all of these. Hopefully will work later on. And real quick about the custom channel data. This is just a setup on how to extract the detail attributes. I usually delete all the points because they are these detail attributes, they stick around. And then I just create a point for each frame. Yeah. And you can just plot them and see that this just is a sine wave, which is clipped off, but that's the input, so yeah. Then we have the live input node. This is experimental. Houdini is not built for real-time applications. You have to be careful. Most of the time, if you have a synth open, your input ports will be blocked. So you would have to close this, for example. Switch this, switch back, and now it should work. And this only works in play mode. If we press play, and I'm tapping on my input pad here, notes appear. And then you can toggle the override mode, which once you start playing again, just overrides. Basically deletes the notes. Should probably zoom in a bit. Oh, shit. It just overrides the notes you were already playing. So you can just start again. We have the reset button. Right now, the notes are stored in your user data, which I want to change. I want to just put them into a regular file cache. Will probably happen later on. And then we have the same trigger animation options here. And if you actually want to hear the notes you are playing live, you need a 1 frame offset. I don't actually exactly know why that is. Theoretically, it should work without, but I think Houdini just, it's not built for this. The point gets added and it should get triggered, but it doesn't get played. But if you add 1 frame offset, it's gonna get played the next frame, which will still feel alright. But yeah, let's look at that. Beautiful stuff. And let's also take a look at the 2 helper nodes that are implemented right now. We have the node notation wrangle that basically converts the Midi nodes, for example, 65 into the actual notation. It's an F4. And yeah, I think that's more or less self-explanatory. And then we also have the node quantizer, which basically fits any nodes into the scale you choose. And there's also this unique nodes toggle, which tries to not assign 2 nodes to the same, 2 points to the same node. It's not entirely working right now, but you can still play around with it. But yeah, we have a bunch of random nodes. They are randomly generated from an attribute noise. And then we quantize them and they get fit into the C major scale here, for example. And there's loads of options. Yeah, also pretty self-explanatory, I hope. Yeah, I hope that gives you enough of an overview to dive into the example setups and play around, or just come up with your own stuff. If you have any, if you have any suggestions on what to add or how to improve anything, just write me a mail, add me on Discord, Instagram, whatever, and let me know.